All right, so the point of today is to create a human base mesh, and we will get pretty close to this point, give or take some feet maybe, but we'll cover kind of how to get started modeling a male base mesh from which we will use as a jumping off point for the rest of the semester, and creating the characters that we ultimately do. So what I want about creating this base mesh, the first thing that I had to do was find a reference. So the way that we'll be creating this mesh is through what's called box modeling, and that is literally starting with a box or cube and then extruding and subdividing and adding edge loops as necessary to get the form that you want. There are a couple of other ways to do it. There's a poly by poly modeling method where you start with a plane or even just one vertex and you just extrude out the faces and the edge loops in the topology that you want very specifically, which I have done with some face models. I have not done it with a whole body. I tend to do it box modeling style. Another option is to do it where you sculpt the base mesh. You start with a cube or a sphere and you jump right into sculpt mode and you start pushing and pulling things around and get the form that you want entirely in sculpt mode, and then you go back and you retopologize it. That's a very popular way of working, particularly those that are experts in ZBrush. I am not one of those people, and nor is this a class on sculpting. It is a rather different skill set that certainly lends itself to 3D, but the skills do not directly translate. So any coverage that we do of sculpting here will be at a very surface level. I can point you in directions of other sculpting tutorials, but that is not what this is. This is going to be box modeling. So as I was getting ready to box model this here mesh, first thing I had to do was find a concept sheet, which I was using as my background images. Okay, I got a side, a front, a side, and if I hold down Control and hit 1, a back view. So the way I did that is I just did a Google search, Google image search for character modeling sheets. You'll find a whole bunch of different ones of varying degrees of open source or Creative Commons. There are some on the CG Cookie network under Concept Cookie and resources turnarounds. Some of them are free. Some of them you need to be a paid member of the network. They are all of very high quality and are very useful. So a few different sources that you can go to. If you can draw, even better. And actually this one is from CG Cookie as well. If you can draw, even better, and then you can make your own modeling sheets. There's actually a pretty wonderful course on Concept Cookie that tells you how to make modeling sheets and how to make them effectively so that they can be used for 3D modeling. But suffice it to say, you need to find a modeling sheet that you're going to start from. I have a very basic one because I'm just worried about the basic forms. So once I got that image, it looked like this. It's just one rather small resolution JPEG. The next thing I had to do was I cut it up in Photoshop because I don't want the full 3 figures visible from every view in Blender. So all I did was open up Photoshop or your image editor of choice and just open up the turnaround and then just cropped out each image in turn, and I just saved them out as front, side, and back. So real simple. Anybody with a passing knowledge of Photoshop should be able to figure that out. And then once I got that, then I was ready to jump into Blender. So Blender. Let me jump to my brand new scene. So we're all starting from the same point. And get the window all lined up. Okay. So as I always do, because I haven't saved the presets yet, I'm going to get rid of the timeline in the bottom because I don't need it. And I'm going to hit Control Space to get rid of my 3D manipulator because I don't use it. It gets in my way. The next thing that I'm going to do is select the cube and the camera and the light. So just shift right click on everything and delete them. X, delete, goodbye. Because I don't need them right now. They're just going to get in the way. I just want to set up my model sheets to begin with. So in the 3D view, I'm going to hit N to bring up my, what is this, properties panel, and toggle down the background images and check the box. And then I'm going to click Add Image. Okay, and I'm going to do that 2 more times because I'm going to add a total of 3 images. You could get by with 2, and some people can get by with just 1. It just depends on how well you intrinsically know the human form and how much you rely on a 3D modeling sheet. At this time, I feel also I should mention these model sheets are great, and I'm going to actually just click Open and open up the front view real quick, navigate to where I saved it. Week 2, mail model sheet, and front. So if you go and hit 1 to go into front view, and then make sure you hit 5 to go into orthographic view. If you're not in orthographic view, then you won't see the model sheet if you're in perspective view. So make sure you're in orthographic view, otherwise you won't see the model sheet. But I feel at this time I should mention that it's also useful to have some sort of anatomy reference with you, as the more detailed and realistic you want to get with your characters, or, well, not even really realistic, just detailed, because even cartoon characters will often, they have some basis in reality. If they're any good, even something really wild like, Alien or Predator or, anything like that, there's still a basis in physical anatomy, because it has to make sense and it has to work. If it doesn't work and you're just randomly throwing joints here and there and there's no logic to it, it's not going to feel like a real creature. So it doesn't matter how outside the realm of human you're going, it's still important to have an anatomic reference for musculature and forms like that. So if you either have like an atlas of the human body, or there's plenty of different websites you can reference for both, how the skeleton is, where the skeleton is in the body, where the bones are, and musculature. So if you're trying to make an arm feel real, you want to know where the bones are, because those are the points that aren't going to move. You can see the collarbones here. Those are going to be. It's important to get those right, because if you don't get those right, it's gonna feel weird. You might not be able to identify why it doesn't feel right, but you'll feel it not feel right. So anatomy references are going to be useful as well. But for now, our modeling sheet will suffice. So I've got I've loaded my front modeling sheet. I'm going to open up my other 2 modeling sheets as well. Let's see, open up my side and open up my back. Okay, so I have all 3 modeling sheets in, and oh my god, they're all different sizes and they're all stacked on top of each other. It is possible to prepare your modeling sheet so that they're all the same size automatically. And what it's doing is Blender is scaling all the modeling sheets so that the width is the same, as you notice. So if you make the overall dimensions the same in Photoshop before you export them, they will all come in as the same size. I did not do that because I wanted to demonstrate what happens oftentimes when the contact sheet or the modeling sheets don't line up exactly. And that's fine. No matter how good you are at drawing or how good the person is who made the concept sheets is at drawing, there will be discrepancies. There will be discrepancies between the front and the side view and the front and the back view. There will also be just general discrepancies between what you're modeling and what looks good or what lines up. So there's an inherent necessity for being able to adapt and use them as reference, but they're not templates. They're not, it's not a Bible of this is the way it has to look. It's just a starting point. And you'll see, particularly if I turn off the side and the back view and you just look at the front view, the way that the knees and the ankles are on here, the knees are kind of turned in a little bit and the ankles are kind of straight. We're probably going to modify that a little bit because it's once you see it in 3D, it's not going to feel right. What looks and feels right in 2D doesn't always translate to 3D. So there's some adjustments that will have to be made that way. Okay, so I've got my modeling sheets all loaded. I'm going to actually leave the side and the back view off for now, which is just clicking the little eyeball in the side panel. And I'm just going to worry about this front view. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to scale this down rather considerable amount. And that's because I like to work under the assumption that in Blender, one Blender unit, one square here, is 1 meter, or roughly 3 feet. So I'm going to scale this down so the model is 2 Blender units tall, or roughly 6 feet. I know it's not a direct translation, but it's close enough, and it'll just feel a little bit better, I think, as we move along. So in the first image settings up here, right at the bottom is size, and if I hold down Shift, I will have a finer tuned control over it. And I'm going to bring the size down pretty far. And from my test earlier, as I zoom in here, 0.64 seemed to work for me if you're working from the same modeling sheets that I am, as anybody in this room is. So that's the size that I'm going to go with. Again, it's to a certain degree arbitrary, but it's just the way that I like to work, and I like to stay organized. Yeah, so that's the size. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up so that the feet are even with this x-axis, because as I rotate around in 3D view, I want the grid to kind of act as a ground plane of sorts. And so to do that, just above the size slider is 2 values, and if I pull them out a little bit, you can see the X and the Y pop up. So X is horizontal and Y is vertical. So if I move the Y up, and again I'm going to hold down Shift so I have a little bit better control, I'm going to move it up to right about there. So 0.57 is what that comes out to for me. Your mileage may vary. The next thing that I'm going to do is center it horizontally so that the z-axis line here is right down the center of the model. And this is going to reveal a little bit of a problem with this, or a little discrepancy with this model sheet. As I move it over so that it is kind of adequately centered for my tastes, and I'm actually lining this up right at the crotch, and then also you can see the collarbones kind of are centered as well. You can see that the belly button is slightly off, and especially the face is off, the head is off. So that's just something we're going to have to keep in mind as we go through the modeling process. And for our purposes, we're actually going to be just having a placeholder head for today, and then later down the line we're going to be bringing in our scanned heads and attaching them to the mesh, so we won't really have to worry about getting an accurate model sheet for a head. But if you're working from different reference, then you have a few different options at this point. Oftentimes you will have a close-up reference of a head. Otherwise, you might just have to move the contact sheet or the character sheet back and forth as you work on different parts to make sure that you're getting the right kind of volumes that you need. But just, it's just another example of discrepancies that will pop up in modeling sheets, no matter how good and how precise they are. Okay, so I've got my front view figured out. I'm happy with it. So I'm going to collapse the front view. And now I'm going to turn the eyeball back on my side view, and you can see as I zoom out that it is enormous. So what I'm going to do is first resize it. Bring the size way down, and then zoom in. And then I'm going to move it up so that the feet are even, and it's still too big, so I'm going to keep bringing the size down. Whoops. Keep bringing the size down to about 0.4, and bring it so that the feet are on the ground, which is 0.36. And then I'm going to move it along the x-axis so that the torso is roughly centered along the z axis. Now, real quick, I'm going to turn off my front view just so you can only see the side view. The arm is separate from the body, and that is pretty common in model sheets, and that's so that you can see what the side of the torso looks like without the arm getting in the way. And this is another instance where if you really need to make sure that the arm is lining up with what you're modeling, then it's just a simple issue of moving the model sheet forward when you're modeling the arm, and then moving it back to the torso when you're modeling the torso. Okay, so right now they're both visible in the same view, and I'm just going to keep it that way just for now. This is a good way to make sure that your sizes are lining up the way that you want them to. So now I'm going to jump down to the back view and turn that back on. And that was a big butt in the screen. So again, size. Zoom back in so I can see what's going on. Move it up, and then adjust the size some more so it's where I need it to be. Oops. And from my test earlier, a 0.621 seemed to work pretty well. And then I'm going to move it down so that its feet are on the ground. And if I turn off the other two background images, I can check the center and the spine and the butt crack are lined up on the centers, and that's a good indication of center as anything that you're going to find, really. So I'm happy with that placement. Again, the head is a little off, but not really that big of an issue. So we've got all three. They're all lined up, and actually, if you turn off the side view and just look at the front and the back overlaid, you can't really tell what details are from what, so that's a good sign. That means that they're lined up well. The next thing that I'm going to do is just assign them to their own individual views. So set the front to the front, the side to the right, and the back to, you guessed it, the back. Now, if I hit 1 on the number pad, I'm still in the front view. I can see the front image. If I hit 3, hovering over the 3D view, if I hit 3 on the number pad, I can see my side view. And if I hold down Control and hit 1, it will take me to my back view, as you can see in the top left, back ortho. And again, you do have to be an orthographic view. If I hit 5 to go into perspective, my reference images are going to disappear.